Hi, I'm Lenora. I'm the creator of The Bitchy Bookkeeper.
Hi, I'm Isabel, founder and firebrand of the Uprising Spark.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm the author of The Age of the Child, and today we're talking about Maxine Trump's To Kid or Not to Kid documentary about her process of coming to terms with whether to have a child, or her desires as far as that's concerned. And I think before we started recording this, we were all talking a little bit about it, and I think we might have come to the conclusion that we all came away with something different from it, or at least from parts of it. So I think we're probably just going to talk about that stuff. I suppose there should be an initial question. I think my initial question would be, just to get us started, what part of the documentary maybe not affected you, either affected you most, was most memorable to you, gave you the strongest reaction?
I made a few notes. The one thing that stood out to me the most was towards the end, Maxine's conversation with her sister, who is a mom, and her sister was saying how when Maxine brought this conversation to her about realizing she was not going to have children, it opened something up in her sister where she started to realize, like, because here's the thing. Maxine asked her sister, what do you like to do? Something to that effect. And her sister had the realization that no one's asked her that in a long time. And she had lived a lot of her life as supermom, and she had her, her career, and I believe she's a minister, but she had this identity as supermom, and, she didn't really know what she even wanted or liked anymore. And so that conversation she had with Maxine opened up her mind a bit, and she was like, oh, wait a sec, what do I like to do? And it started her thinking, and she said that she started to like herself again and kind of find out who she was again because Maxine asked that question to her. And the point they both made was that how, a parent and a child-free person can, when they interact with one another, they can really open each other up to different possibilities, different ideas, and the interaction can actually be quite meaningful. Because yes, they're approaching life from different angles, but that can help each other and feed each other. And, my brother has a kid or two kids, and I can be an aunt to my nephews, and he benefits from that. And, there's some, they say, who's going to take care of you when you get older? Well, I can say, my nephews can, whatever. But the point that they made was that it's not just mothers hanging out together and child-free people hanging out together. Each one can equally bring something to the table in their relationship, and it can actually open up more dialogue, which is really necessary. So that was I think my favorite part of the documentary that stuck with me the most.
In my case, I think for me it was her journey, right? So she's married and she's trying to determine whether she wants to have a child or not. I don't think she was she had a very clear idea in her mind, but I also thought at some point that maybe she did want a child, and then she was kind of considering whether that was a good choice for her or not. I think the one thing that really got to me, and it was a very small part of the documentary, and it was just that moment when she mentions that her husband had realized that he had fathered, I think it's twins, right? And he didn't know about them. And twins were like maybe 2 or 3 years old. So because he had the desire to become a dad. And so basically this realization kind of fixes that in a way. It's like, oh, he already has children, and he's bonding with them more. So it was a bit like that relief that I put myself in that situation, and then if I get married to a man who is either a non-fencer or eventually wants kids, like that pressure that one can feel, it's like they want them, but I'm not sure. Like in the case of Maxine, or in my case, I really don't want children. And then, having this thing happen, like this thing that was actually had happened already, but he didn't know about. And then now he's like, oh, I'm a dad. And that kind of like takes that pressure off. But yeah, I think that's maybe the thing that I can recall most right now.
I think I must have missed something because I know when she said something about him, being a dad to these twins who he didn't find out about until 2 years in. But I was under the impression that he had known about that from before they started filming. Was that something he found out about while they were doing this documentary? Because there's the part where they're sitting out in the lawn and he says he has a hard time imagining a life without kids in it. And that's when he says something about there still being time to adopt. So was it after that, I guess, that he found out about the kids? I just kind of assumed he had known the whole time they were doing this.
No, I think it is my understanding that they found out after that. Because I think the way she worded it, that was the thing that shocked me a little bit. It was like, he found out his father.
Just found out. Oh, okay. I saw it twice and I totally missed that.
I didn't even know that part because I watched the version on CBC, which I know was cut at 15 minutes, was edited out like throughout the film just to kind of shorten the time. So I knew that he had children, but I did not know the detail. I did not know of this part. So I'm just learning this right now from you two.
Yeah, that's what I gathered. Because I remember thinking, I understand that all situations are different and, we don't know because they don't explain what the situation was between Maxine's husband and his ex, whatever it was, girlfriend, partner, whatever you want to call it, wife. I have no idea. So it's a bit like it comes a little bit out of left field for me in a way. It's just something that it's kind of those things in the movies that you see and it's like a turn of events, but it's just they just mention it and it's like carry on with Maxine. They carry on, of course, with Maxine's story because the documentary is about her anyway. So that for me was a bit like, oof, that must have been really trying, I guess, emotionally speaking, for him. I guess.
Yeah, but imagine. I think you might. Did you say something about the weight being lifted off of her?
Yeah.
Like, if I had a spouse who desperately, or I guess who wanted kids at all, and I felt the pressure of that desire from him, I don't know whether I would be more uncomfortable with the fact that he has kids with someone else or a greater percentage happy that, oh God, good, someone else took care of it. I don't even have to think about it anymore. One of the strongest reactions I had to it was in the lawn where they're sitting out there talking and he says he has a hard time imagining just this life forever without kids. And then he says the thing about, well, there's still time for adoption. And I swear, unless it was just me projecting and how I would feel in that situation if I didn't want kids and someone brought up, well, we can always adopt. I swear I felt her whole self just go utterly still in a moment of no. You know what I mean? Like, shit, I thought we were in the clear and now you're bringing up adoption. It's like, when I was married to my first husband, I did a telephone psychic because I was just in a really bad place. And I was it's always been like a marital bad place. If I'm in a bad place, it's because I'm really desperately unhappy romantically. But I called this psychic and he's talking about seeing the colors around me, like, oh, I see red. And I looked at my floor and my carpet was red. So I thought, yes. And then he said, and I see green and my comforter was green. So I thought, oh God, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And at the time I was thinking about Ian, who I'm married to now. We've known each other a long time. And I kind of had this fantasy that we would end up together someday. So this psychic says that the guy I'm married to now is someone who I'll go into and out of relationships with, we'll kind of go in and out, but we'll always be together. And I think that was supposed to be happy news. But when he said that, I was like, no. I just felt utter dread that he was saying that I would stay in this relationship with this man. And that was the last thing I wanted. So that was kind of the impression I got with the whole we can always adopt situation. It just, I don't know. It just felt so like he was just shrouding her in cement. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from, but I think, you're decidedly child free. So, and I'm decidedly child free, and so is Lenora. So, if we were to be in that situation, I think I would feel the same way you just described that you kind of like felt when you saw that. Bit like, what do you mean we can still adopt? Like, what, what part of I don't want kids don't understand? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but in her case, I think because the documentary is about that journey, because she wasn't sure at the beginning, right? Like she wasn't sure. Um, she goes through a lot of, questions, and of course she talks with her husband and starts exploring the life of her friends that have children, and then like, she just kind of like goes down that path of exploring a little bit what it is that, having children means and what it is that not having children means as well. So I think maybe he still he held that glimmer of hope of we can still adopt, because maybe at some point she would have been okay with that. I would have felt sick at the moment my husband said to me that, but maybe she wasn't sure at that time.
But this is where I had a different interpretation, because at the beginning of the documentary, now again, this is the version that I saw on CBC, it starts with her saying she never wanted to have children. She never thought about having children. She, her 20s and 30s, she was traveling around the world, and then she never even thought about getting married. And then she met somebody, and then she got married, and then she got to the point where in her 40s, she's like realizing now in her 40s, this is what my interpretation of this is that at that point, then she realized, oh, okay, I need to make a choice because the doors are closing. So do I not want to have children like I've been kind of living my life as, or do maybe I want one? And then that kind of opened up the exploration. That was my takeaway from this documentary. So when the parts that you're mentioning, when talking with her husband, and then the stepchildren thing came up, and even her mother had mentioned that she tells people, oh, but she has stepchildren. And then Maxine's like, well, actually, you don't even have to say that because it doesn't sound like she's involved as a stepmother. Like, my dad is married to a woman who didn't have children, and they got married, like, I was 30, in my 30s or late 20s when they got married. So I don't refer to her as my stepmom because she had nothing to do with raising us, right? So that term stepchildren can be, just because you're married to someone with kids doesn't mean you have to be the step parent. I certainly wouldn't want that title, So anyway, that was my interpretation of her thought process. Maybe just coming to the realization at 40, like, oh, okay, I need to really decide. So, I didn't see anything that kind of explored anything more as to why she started to think that way.
I didn't get that impression either. Like, I got the same impression you did, which is that it was never something that occurred to her. And she even said that she was angry about having to decide this now. Like, suddenly you're with somebody. If you've never been with somebody before with whom having kids is even a possibility, and you don't actively want them, you probably won't think about it. But then as soon as you get with somebody who you haven't even talked about kids with, I guess you would have to think about it, and maybe having to think about it, because I remember having to think about it the first time I was married, when I realized, oh God, he wants kids. It's like, I've never wanted them. I feel a compulsion to run away from the idea, but there's all that pressure that she talked. I mean, at the end, she cries because she's finally comfortable just with saying it or with being around other people who don't want it. So obviously there's been all this pressure on her, like from society, from her mother, sister, I mean, everyone. And so if you have that kind of thing, even if the core of you is not really for it yourself, I could see just doubting yourself, that all makes you doubt yourself.
We're all agreeing on one thing, and it is that she was not decidedly child free. I mean, even though she hadn't had any children, she had made a life in which she was filming documentaries, traveling the world, doing her thing, having fun, But she never had made that decision specifically.
No.
And then she found herself in a relationship questioning whether she wanted to become a mother or not. So it's like being put in that kind of situation without you not knowing what it is that you want. I think I think that would make things a lot more difficult, I guess. I mean, if I wasn't decidedly child free and I found myself in a relationship with somebody who wanted eventually to have children, I think that could have exerted on me some type of pressure or some type of influence, at least. And then maybe I would have been like, yeah, okay, let's have a kid, or because if you don't know what it is that you want in that sense, if you're not 100% sure that at this point in time you don't want to have children or you do want to have children, then it's a bit like life takes decisions for you.
I agree, because I'm thinking back to our episode that we did talking about relationships and dating and stuff. And now kind of looking at it from a different perspective, I mean, I still have the same approach, whereas I won't even consider a relationship, because the second thing out of my mouth is I'm child free, because it's part of what I do. So that conversation comes up really early whenever I meet anybody. But I agree with you, Isabel, on the pressure that it can, and I can see a little more clearly now why someone suddenly finds himself in a relationship and goes, oh, and that influence is huge, because I know women specifically that have that are mothers because of that, where they were like, nope, not having kids, don't want to have kids for whatever reason, and then they're like, then they met someone and it was like, oh, this person would make such a great father, so I'm going to give him a child. So there's that influence. For me, being decidedly child-free, it's not even getting to that point, because you meet somebody and there's sparks and there's a vibe and you're like, okay, but because the conversation comes up early before there's anything, it's easy to remove yourself, because you're like, well, you know what, I can't do that for you. No, this may have been amazing or may not. It may last a few years, may last a lifetime, whatever. But this is something that's important to me. Therefore, I'm not even going to start the relationship, because that would come up. One of us would be expecting the other person to change. And I can't kid myself, pardon the pun, to expect that person to come over to the child-free side, knowing that that person's expecting me to come over to the parent side, right? So, watching this documentary, and I don't know, I'm trying to be more empathetic, maybe because I am comfortable and enjoy being by myself and only pursue relationships where I have all the freedom I want. So and now I have to concede that, yes, she probably wasn't decidedly child-free, because getting into a relationship, okay, so you said that they didn't know, or he didn't know, well, when they got married or whatever, he did not know these twins existed?
That's my impression.
Okay, because I didn't even know that part. So, because then I'm going, well, someone's background, if they're still kind of on the fence, why would you pursue that? But it's easy for me to say that as someone who's, would be cutting that off before anything started. So I have to keep in mind that, circumstances change as relationships develop and stuff, and new evidence comes to light. That would be, I think that's a part of why I'm like, I don't ever want to get married or legally bound to somebody, because if that came like 15 years into the relationship and that came up, that there was children, I'd be like, fuck. Because I had this happen, and I've said this before, but when the one public dating relationship I had with a guy, I think the second week we were dating, I had said, I like this is good, and, it's great that, you kind of like tick all my boxes at the time. And then he said, well, I have something to tell you. And I'm like, okay, what? And he's like, actually, I have a child. And he had never met the child, never met the child. It was like, a teenage pregnancy type thing, paid child support. But that right there, I was like, oh.
It sounded like you said he tickled my boxes.
I heard the same thing. But...
Yeah. Okay. Ticked all my boxes. Do you want to edit that in there somewhere? Okay. So let me say this again.
No, it's good the way it was. That's funny.
We'll just edit.
No, I want to keep it. It's fun.
Fine. Okay. His qualities ticked all the boxes that I had. But then he sprung on, actually, I have a child, even though he had nothing to do with raising the child. And I've said this before, I can't be, it did cause issues later. Not even, the child was never involved in our lives, but emotionally there was still something that he was dealing with. So that is something I've always wanted to avoid at all costs, because I know that's not what I want from my experience. So it's hard for me because I'm so stubborn about that and so rigid, like find all that shit out before you get into a relationship. It is really hard for me to empathize with that news being sprung up. So I have to be more aware that this stuff happens and it's not the fault of anybody, but it's not always cut and dry for people just because it is for me is my point.
But the fact that this, my interpretation, and because of the word, it was the way it was worded and what happened in the documentary is that they found out about the twins when they were already married. Like the twins were maybe 2 or 3 years. No, how old were they? Yeah, 2. I can't remember exactly. And that's why I said that kind of like lifted that pressure on her in a way. Like she could be freer in a way to make the decision without her husband going, but I really want a kid. I really, really, really want a kid. Like you already have 2, dude. It's like, and then he actually after a while, the other part of the documentary that I really liked was the fact that he actually got a vasectomy and let her film it. Well, no, like you guys looking at this, there's no like specific filming of the actual vasectomy, but he did get one. And I think that is to show as well how much he supports her in her decision. So it's kind of like he was like, well, okay, I already have these children and I don't have to, ask her that about adoption or whatever it is because I really want to become a dad. I'm already a dad. She already decided she don't want to have kids. Let's just do this. And I think it's pretty cool that a guy can, get himself to that point to make a decision, because I know a lot of men who don't because of macho reasons, which have absolutely nothing to do with, regarding her friendship on Maxine's documentary, like that kind of like touched me at a personal level. I don't think I've lost friends specifically for the fact that I'm child free and vocal about it. Not yet, at least. But I did lose a very close friend for other reasons, but she is, she's a mother. She has a couple of kids and she's married and she has that life that I find absolutely boring. But for me, it was like when she was debating whether she should reach out or not, and then she did, and the whole, because I know how difficult that can be in terms of how painful it is to lose somebody that you love so much, who's been your friend, who's been by your side for so long in so many situations, and then for whatever reason, they just stop being in your life. And that got to me at a personal level, in the sense that I don't think that I would have, I don't know, my situation is completely different, but if I lost one of my closest friends because I told her that having children is selfish, or she just didn't agree with the fact that I don't want to have children, I think I would not try to reconnect. I don't know. I just think it would be very hard for me, because that's the kind of way of thinking that I'm trying to not change, but kind of like point out in a way, like people who are so pronatalist that they don't really even understand that there's other ways to live your life. Like for me, that's just like, no, you're closed-minded and no. And I can't speak, of course, on Maxine's specific situation because I don't know exactly what happened afterwards or what this friend represented in her life. But I think it would be hard for me to try to reconnect with somebody who wasn't in agreement with what I thought about reproducing and being a mother.
I would have to wonder why it was so devastatingly painful to them. People tell people who don't want children that they're selfish all the time, and we're just like, yeah, whatever. But it's not, and it didn't sound like Maxine was telling her friend that her friend was selfish. It really just sounded like she was talking about large families in general. So it's just so curious. Like, why did it hurt so bad? Why did it end a friendship,
Okay, but think about her mother's reaction. I was really curious by her mother's a few of her mother's comments, and maybe this speaks a little bit to the friendship thing, but her mom said that she worried for Maxine, like, about regret. And she even brought up, like, her mom has a disability or is physically disabled to a point. And she said, well, I have my kids to lean on, and Maxine's never going to have kids to lean on for that. And also, we hear when people are talking about child free, like, oh, well, it's only going to be you and your partner, and that's all you're going to have, as if there's no possible way to build the community outside from having children. So it's possible, and then her mother also worried about future regret, or Maxine regretting, and just the things that her mom has experienced that Maxine wouldn't experience, that her mom obviously treasures. So it kind of pulled her in a couple different directions of wanting to support Maxine, but also fearful. So it's possible that her friend has that same feeling to an extent where it's like, well, I can't imagine, I don't know if this is true, but it's like, I can't imagine going through life without, because people have children for a support system, whether it's their children or the community that comes into their life because they are parents. And I think that not having that scares more people into having children, or it scares people at the thought of not having that because they don't know how else they would develop a community or a support system without breeding their own children. So, and my view is, like, you can create whatever community you want. It doesn't have to all come out of you. So, but a lot of people don't think that way. So I think, it's fear and regret. I was going to say coming out of my vagina, but I decided not to.
You should have.
Yeah, well, okay. So I always say that you can create wonderful things that don't come out of your vagina. So, I think there's that fear. It's always comes down to fear that people have those reactions, whether it's friendship or family members that question, like, why are you doing this? But her mom's reactions kind of are blanket reactions that most people have. Like, if you listen to what her mom says.
Yeah, but on the flip side, her sister, completely different reaction. Like, her sister,
I know, and I loved
it. Really supportive, yeah. And she was like, and her nephews also, like, that. There's a scene where she's talking to her nephews. I think she has 2 nieces and a nephew, if I'm not mistaken, or 2 nephews and a niece. I can't remember. And they are all like, talking about that life and not having kids, and then they're all like really supportive. Like, I can't imagine her family. I mean, of course, maybe her mom comes from that different generation, which is a little bit more, how do you say it?
Old school.
Yeah, a little bit more old school, a little bit more traditional in that sense. And of course, her mom with her ailment, she has, her at least her sister, Maxine's sister, is helping out and whatnot because she lives in Wales with her. But I can't imagine, like, the rest of her family, after watching the documentary, not being supportive of that, And in any case, if she ever needs her family, I'm sure her sister and her nephews and nieces are going to be there for her as well. So I think that was pretty cool too.
Her mom does say at one point that she said I don't know the words exactly. She said the first mistake I made, or the one mistake I made, was when I married your father, because you get married and then you have kids. That's what you do. Like, almost as if she were saying, well, my whole life was decided for me when I got married, because the way I saw it, when you get married, you have kids. So for her mother, it doesn't sound like it was necessarily a conscious choice. My mom has said that too, that's what you did. You got married, you had kids. And then one of the answers that her mom gives when Maxine asks her mom in this conversation, if you could go back before having ever had kids and do it again, I don't know if she said, would you do it again or would you change it? But her mother said no, but it was really unclear whether no meant I wouldn't change anything or no, I wouldn't have kids. But it seems like there's something in her mom. I'm sorry, Maxine and Maxine's mom. I'm not suggesting I have any idea what you were thinking, but what I took from it, the sense I got, was that she is someone who had kids because that's what you do. It was hard. She did her best. almost, I'm watching The Crown right now. It almost feels like being the Queen of England or even being Prince Charles. You know, you're born into this situation. This is the life that's put on you, and this is the life you live with no choice. It's just, well, I guess this is it.
That's the feeling I got as well, because it's when you come across something that challenges everything you've ever known or everything that you've been taught, it's unnerving, because suddenly what you've based your security on and what you've based like the foundation for your life is like, oh, wait a second, what? And then, you know, everyone processes it differently, and everything that I saw on film, all the interactions with her mother, the term wistful comes to mind. And again, I too will apologize to Maxine and Maxine's mom and not putting any thoughts or words into your mouth. But to me, it's a similar reaction I've had with older women, the conversations I've had with older women where they're like, yes, that's what we did. We got married, we had children. Some of us went to school, some didn't. And some of us had careers later on in life, but that's just what you did. And then it's like that light bulb moment of, oh, well, things can be different. Yeah, okay, so we can't change anything. I wouldn't change it. Everything did work out, but had no idea. It's kind of the feeling I had when I realized my religion that I grew up in wasn't necessarily accurate, or I don't know how to put it, but it was like it's like, what? You know, you're just all of a sudden your head's spinning and you don't even know how to react, and it makes you think, and not in a comfortable way.
Can I have a bullet point version of what your religion was? Like, what were the basic tenets?
Basically, we lived exactly like the Bible stated, mostly the New Testament. There was no name attached, but it was, I'll send you a website that's actually been created by former members, and that will explain why I'm so weird. Let's put it that way.
Well, I know there was no TV.
Let's see. Women wear dresses, hair up. We kind of look like polygamists.
So you kind of look like the
sister wives.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh God, what do you say about it? Well, and also there's the churches are in home Sunday and Wednesday. Sometimes 3 services a week. There's a lot. Were the men the supremely dominant figures, or did women? Of course they were. That's just like in every religion. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. No, there was no different. I'll send you a website, or you can just Google 2x2 religion. Don't put this.
The number 2 or letter.
Go 2x2 religion, and you will find the 2 main websites. One of them is tellingthetruth.org or something. It's a very interesting read, and all of it is accurate, and it will explain everything you want to know. Again, as to why I am so weird. Learning Lenora. Hey, that would be the title of my movie if, you know, what we were asked on Funky Thinkers. You had girl sits, and mine would be called Learning Lenora. Anyway, yeah. But anyway, so I was raised in that, but that's something that was so ingrained in you, just like the whole child, like having a child, or, you know, women have children, that it's not even a question, it's a fact, right? Like, we're taught that that's a fact. That's what you do. There's no deviation from that. So then to find out that there's an alternative, it's hard to compute, really. I mean, I can't even imagine I know I wrote my grandma a card that said, I've decided not to have children. I never got a response. But if I had said that to her face, and she came from the time period where that's what you did, and I can't say that my grandma was a happy woman per se, but I would never know. Like, your brain can't even process that. For some, our generation is very different. But I'm just saying, like, the thought of, like, let alone personal happiness and self-care. Like, you know, it's just, so that's what I see. That's what I saw on the interactions with her and her mother. But it was nice to see that she had accepted it and moved on, that Maxine was not going to have children. That above anything else is important, because how many people do we speak to on a regular basis that do not have family support? And it's really important, like, to see this on TV, because I watched this on TV on the channels, like, you know, in Canada it was broadcasted. It was really nice to see that response, because it's so important, and so many people do not have that level of support within their own family, and that needs to be shown, because this is going to allow people to feel safe to, like, speak their own mind, even if they only do it within their family, let alone public. Right? So it was just really nice to see that.
All right. That is our conversation for today. If you haven't seen Maxine's documentary, To Kid or Not to Kid, I know it's on Prime in the States right now. I'm not sure where it is, where you're living, but you should be able to find it somewhere. It's really worth watching. We didn't even talk about the woman who's trying to get sterilized and who has the worst time of it. It's just watch the documentary. It's really good. We're also hoping to have Maxine on our show sometime in the future. Not sure exactly when yet, but we are looking forward to the very strong possibility. If you have things you want to say about this episode, or your own thoughts about the documentary, if you have seen it, or any questions or any comments whatsoever, you can reach us at childfreegirls@gmail.com. You can find us online pretty much everywhere, but we're mostly active on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We may have an occasional TikTok thing. We're on Pinterest, so we're places, and you can find us at Childfree Girls at all those places. So our question for you to answer in the comments of our YouTube page, if you want to comment down there, or you can send us an email if you want to be private, is how do you think you would feel or react if you found out that your partner had kids with someone else, somewhere else? They could either have known or not known, but either way, you're suddenly finding out. Would you be relieved because the weight's off you? Would you be irritated because now you're a step-parent, or anything else? Let us know.